Hi everybody. So this week for EDU 300, you read 3 chapters, one on ethics, one on data collection, and one on evaluating teacher research. So I have a PowerPoint for you and some comments about ethics. I also have one for you on data collection with some comments on that as well. In these PowerPoints, I'm recapping some of the important aspects of what you read for this week and adding some commentary just to help you possibly answer some questions you may have and to help us think about the totality of what it means to be a researcher. So first of all, we look at ethics. And if we define ethics, we can look at it as a branch of philosophy that defends and normalizes ethical behavior or the concepts of right and wrong. We can put all kinds of words as a prefix to ethics, as medical ethics, business ethics, personal ethics, professional ethics. In our case, it's researcher ethics. So ethics then is really involves the rules of behavior about what's right and what's wrong, and in using our moral principles to guide us in our research. So first of all, in any kind of research, we want to do no harm. This is a concept that's used in the medical field quite often, that first do no harm. But we also employ that in the social sciences as well. And so first we want to do no harm to our participants, to students, to teachers, to whomever is involved in our research project. It's our job as a researcher to make sure that the research doesn't harm students in any way. And if you're the classroom teacher or an ed tech or any other employee of a school where you are conducting research, this becomes even more crucial. You have to ensure that a teacher research project does not affect students in terms that they would get a lower grade if they didn't participate, or they'd get perks if they participated. We have to be very, very careful about that in singling out participants from other students. I'm not saying you would do that, but it's happened before. And so the ethical considerations are that if you are a teacher in a classroom, you have to be very, very careful about making sure that it does not interfere with your teaching of all students. And if you're not a teacher in a classroom and you're conducting some action research or educational research, the same rules apply, that you want to make very sure that what you do and the results that you get do not harm students. You may not get the results you thought you were going to get, and you have to make a decision. Do I report these findings? Will it hurt somebody? Will I do more damage than not? So these are all considerations we have to think about. I'm going to introduce you to some of the federal laws regarding ethics. So what's known as the common rule for ethics is the federal guidelines for protecting research subjects. And this came about after the Belmont Report, and in 1974 was the Research Act, and after that came national institutional review boards for oversight of human research. So here's a definition for the common rule. It's a federal policy regarding human subjects protection that applies to 17 federal agencies and offices. It does not apply to federal agencies that have not signed the agreement. For example, the Department of Labor does not adhere to the common rule, but educational institutions do. All right, and I didn't list all 17 agencies. You can look it up if you want to see it. It's not vitally important for this course, but it's nice to know who signed on to this. Okay. And then, so the legislation for this came about in 1981 after the National Research Act of 1974 and after the Belmont Report, and governs institutional review boards for oversight of human research. There's a document in Blackboard that goes over more regulations regarding research with minors and research in schools, and I'm not going to go over those. I gave it to you for your information so you'd understand the protections that are in place for students in schools. And FERPA is one of the ones that you probably know about that gives parents rights over student records and privacy. So as we think about doing research, if we're going to be doing research with minors, we have to have parental consent. So do look over that document and some of those other regulations. There's one that's a sub D, I think, that gives parents a higher level of control over some particularly sensitive subjects. So do take a look at that. just to give you some background in the federal laws that govern protecting research subjects. So institutional review boards, or as in academia as we fondly call them, IRB. So what are these? These are an ethics committee that approve, review, and monitor biomedical and behavioral research involving humans. Any research involving human subjects is subject to institutional review, okay, at a university. A key goal of these boards is to make sure that humans are not harmed, are not subjected to any physical or psychological harm, and that participants have given their informed consent to be part of the research. If we think back historically to some of the horrendous medical and psychological experiments that have taken place on human subjects, you can better understand how the institutional review boards came about and why they are so strict. We can go back and look at Nazi Germany and the horrible things that happened there. We can look at some of the Millbury experiment, where people were thought they were actually killing people by pushing a button. I mean, it's some of the things that went on was horrendous. So, I mean, it seems sometimes when we go through institutional review board review that it seems very cumbersome and difficult, but it's there for a reason, because what came prior to that was not good at all. So I'm sure you're wondering about what institutional review boards have to do with you as a student. And I'll get to that in a second, but I want to talk a little bit about what researchers must provide to IRB. Researchers who are subject to IRB approval. They have to submit a statement of research intent. They have to submit data collection plans with interview questions, survey questions, or how archival material will be used and analyzed. So everything has to be formulated up front and sent to the IRB for approval. And you can't add things on later. So it's not something that you just make up as you go along. It has to be fully formulated before you begin your research and has to be approved. You have to have consent forms for parents or eligible students over 18 that outline in detail what the participant will be asked to do and how the participants will be protected from harm. This is very important. You have to tell them what some of the risks are, what some of the benefits. And then if students are under 18, you can also provide them with assent forms, which students cannot give consent, but they can give their assent, which means that if the parents give consent, they can say, okay, I agree to this too. And students may not want to do it. Parents may consent, and students may not want to. And that's an ethical dilemma. You know, what do? You don't do it, because if the students don't want to do it, then it's not going to be a good research result. So UMA and IRB. So UMA has an IRB, and I've gone through the IRB process for my research project that I'm doing along with you. But IRB approval is generally not needed if the research is being conducted by students as part of a university course, unless the researcher wishes to publish the findings. So if you are anticipating you would like to publish your findings anywhere, you will need IRB approval. Other than that, you probably won't. However is huge. We will decide on an individual basis whether your research project will need IRB approval. And if it does, I will help you with that process. Okay. I spoke to one of the members of the IRB review board last week, inquiring about this. I wanted to make sure we were doing this properly and ethically. And his unofficial indication was that we probably would be exempt from review. But we want to make sure we do this right. So as you formulate your plans, we will look at them carefully and we will decide if they need IRB approval. And I may even ask the IRB board if they can give me a thumbs up, or do you need research, need approval or not. So we'll just keep this in mind, but know what institutional review boards are. They're to look at your plan to make sure that it's your participants are protected from harm, that the questions you're asking are ethical, that the materials you're examining are ethically being used, and so forth and so on. So a little bit about data fidelity. Okay, so again, as I indicated, you have to have your plan up front, and whether you need IRB approval or not, in this course you're going to have your plan completely done, an action plan for research, before you begin your research. Okay, so you can only use the data for which you receive permission to use. So you're going to have to receive permission from somebody, obviously, to do your research. And so if you ask, say, an eligible student, someone over 18, or an eligible person, that you want to use individual interview material with questions you've already formulated, and you can't change the questions either. So if you have questions that you're going to ask participants, Those are the only questions you can ask them. And you're also going to look at some journals or some documentation. Okay, and if those are the only two things you ask to use, it's the only things you can use. Even if you discover that there's another data source somewhere that you could be very rich and that you'd like to use, you may not use it unless you receive permission. And if it's a non-IRB approved project where you didn't need IRB approval, then you can just get another consent form signed. If it's IRB approval, then you must go back to IRB and get approval again. And that can be a very lengthy process. So you want to make sure that your action research report, your proposal, is full and robust, that you've thought of everything you want to think of and it's all in there. Again, so if you find information from other sources, you can't use it. Confidentiality is very important. This involves the use of pseudonyms to conceal identities. Most research projects that one would conduct in a classroom or with minors needs to be masked. Okay, in other words, there has to be, the use of pseudonyms. This includes students, teachers, and sometimes the school. So if you're doing research in a particular school, by naming the school, you could be there could be clues as to who the students were, who the participants were in the project, and that is a lead you don't want to leave. So it may be that you have to give the school a pseudonym, the location a pseudonym, and the student. So we're going to look very carefully at this at your research projects and what you decide to do and the issue of confidentiality. Now it may be that you are working with an adult person who does not want his or her identity to be masked. In that case, you must have permission to do that. It can't just be, I don't care if you use my name. It has to be written down in a consent form that this person is consenting to the use of his or her real name and situations. Okay, that doesn't usually happen. Most people don't want to have that happen, but it could. It could be like a narrative analysis, a biography of somebody that you're doing a narrative analysis on. That person is very proud of what he or she has to say, and they want people to know. But we're going to look at it very carefully. So we have to be very careful about this idea of confidentiality. Deception, huge. Okay, no matter how important something might seem to your research, if the participant says this is off the record, it must remain off the record, period. Okay? No hidden microphones. If you're going to audio tape someone, they must be informed and they must consent to being audio taped. You can't tack that on later. So if your consent form says that you want to interview people and you don't write that you're going to tape the conversation, you may not tape it. Okay? And if you do say you want to tape it, you have to ensure and tell that person how those tapes will be handled, who will have access to them, where they will be stored, and when they will be destroyed. Okay? Very, very important. Because an audio tape, think about what goes viral on Facebook. People get a hold of photographs or videos or audio tapes, and next thing you know, it's gone across the country. And I'm not saying that would happen with educational research, but it could. So we have to really guard against that. And then accuracy. Again, this is akin to deception. Any attempt to manipulate your data or fabricate data to suit your beliefs is unethical. And I know you all know this, but I need to put it out there just to make sure you understand. Okay? And even just tweaking it a little bit is unethical. You must report it as you see it. You can analyze it through a lens that may seem like you're manipulating the data, but as long as you're presenting it, you present the data as it is, and then analyze it. That's where you can not manipulate it, but that's where you can really flesh out what you believe is happening here. All right. And even if the results of your research contradict your hypothesis or beliefs, you are ethically bound to report the findings accurately. Okay. So if you think you're going to come up with one result, you come up with a totally different one, you've got to have to report it as such. Okay. You can hypothesize of why it's that way, but you have to report it. I've presented you with some models. Okay. I've given you, and these are in Blackboard, I've given you a UMA informed consent for my teacher identity research. Okay, this is an informed consent letter I sent out to my participants, and those who wanted to participate signed. I had 55 people to whom I sent these out, and I had 17 or 18, I can't remember the exact number, who have agreed. So my project involves these 17 or 18 people. I cannot use any information from those other people because they didn't give their consent. No matter how much I would like to use it, I may not use it because I don't have their consent. All right. I've also given you UM, which is the Orono campus, informed consent for parents for my dissertation on writing centers. And I've given you the assent form for students for that dissertation as well. By the way, if you want to read my dissertation, or at least look at it in terms of what a lengthy research project, and believe me, you're not doing anything like that. Don't even think about that. This is going to be a very small project. But the frame is the same, okay, in terms of what is involved. Okay, it's just that for a literature review, yours may be 2 pages or 3, where mine's 22, or I don't know, I'm kind of making that number up, but it was a fairly lengthy literature review. So, but if you want to look at it, you can Google it and find it. And you can see how it's set up, okay? And ours will be set up similarly to that, okay? But I wanted to give you those consents because that will give you an idea of the comprehensiveness that's needed for consent forms, okay? Whoops, and that, my folks, was the end of it. Sorry about that. I thought I had one more. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll be seeing you again soon.